Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for.
And I do want to go ahead and wrap with what was actually probably the most entertaining game of the day, right? Like we had games with more implications in terms of the Tennessee game, more questions with Ohio State, Michigan, maybe even TCU. I don't know that there was just a more fun game to watch if you just like back and forth, up and down football. Now, keep in mind, this ain't your grandfather's Big Ten football with USC and UCLA. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But final score at the Rose Bowl, 48-45. Again, wildly entertaining, two great offenses. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like they were not two incredibly flawed defenses, but with the victory, there is a lot to talk about as USC, as we just discussed, now in control of their own playoff destiny. I want to talk about Caleb Williams' Heisman Trophy candidacy, and more important, the fact that Lincoln Riley just has this program so far ahead of schedule. It is unbelievable. In terms of the game itself, listen, you don't need me to go play by play, minute by minute, quarter by quarter, because if I did, we'd be here until March breaking it all down. When the score is 48-45, when the over-under is set at 76 in the Betfred Sportsbook, and it goes over by close to 3 touchdowns, you know it was insanity. But listen, we knew this is what this game could evolve into. Two great quarterbacks, two great offensive minds in Chip Kelly and obviously Lincoln Riley, and two incredibly flawed defenses. Like I said, this is what we are going to get. But in terms of why USC ended up winning this game, it's really, frankly, the reason that they've won all their games this year is they now sit at 10-1 and again control their own playoff destiny. The defense isn't great, but they force a crap ton of turnovers, and they have Caleb Williams, and you do not. And if you want to know the blueprint as to how USC got to this point, that is exactly it. And that is exactly what could ultimately get them to the playoff this year. In terms of the first part, listen, I remember talking about this back in September. I remember talking about this when USC went on the road to Oregon State in about week 4, week 5. And what I said was everybody is focused on the point totals and the total defense allowed. And I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it and pretend that they got the dudes that Georgia's got, or the dudes that Michigan's got, or the dudes that Alabama or Ohio State have. But what I said at the time, and what has rang true through 11 weeks of this season, they are an opportunistic defense, and there is more than one way to be productive on defense and win when you have a quarterback that good. Well, fast forward to Saturday night. Did you see what USC's defense did? Yes, they gave up a crap ton of yardage. Yes, they gave up a crap ton of points, but they made a couple of huge plays when they absolutely needed to. They actually had not one, but 2 picks shortly before the half. One of them led directly to a field goal to give USC a slight lead at the time. By the way, what was the final score? It was 48-45. You think that field goal mattered? It did, and it was set up by the defense. And oh, by the way, keep in mind also that the final play of the game that sealed the victory, it wasn't the final play, but the final play of the game for UCLA that sealed the victory was an interception as well. So this is who USC has been all year, and we have to give them credit, man. Listen, you could talk about total points allowed, points allowed, total defense. I'm not going to sit here and defend the stats that they have, but oh, by the way, this is year 1. But at the end of the day, this is how they've won games. The stats are incredible. So I looked it up. They have forced 24 total turnovers in 11 games. That is really impressive. That is top 5 in the country. More importantly, and this is important, they have only turned the ball over 4 times themselves all year. So when you're plus 20 in turnover margin, that is going to put you in position to win a lot of games, especially when you have a guy named Caleb Williams at quarterback. And so let's get into Caleb Williams here, because I'll just say this. Listen, I think there's been kind of a groundswell in the last few weeks, really, and I don't mean to make light of the Hendon Hooker situation, because obviously the news is so awful. We just talked about it. But why I bring it up is because of the fact that I think since Hendon Hooker, the loss to Georgia, I think people have been trying to figure out, okay, who's really the Heisman favorite? Is it CJ Stroud? Does Drake May from North Carolina have an argument? And Caleb Williams. And I haven't been like a huge, like, Caleb Williams is the guy kind of person, but I do think, like, to me, he should absolutely be the front runner after Saturday night. And why he should be the front runner, I'm not somebody that cares that much about stats, okay? There's a lot of empty stats. I'm not an analytics guy. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a what do I see with my two eyeballs guy. And so I liked Hendon Hooker early because of what he had done to elevate the Tennessee program. I'd argue I still like Hendon Hooker to be in the conversation depending on what happens the next few weeks. We know how important Hendon Hooker was, but to go back to Caleb Williams, what you cannot deny is his importance on this specific USC team. If USC even had like B+ quarterback play right now, I think there's a pretty good chance that they're 8-4 or 9-3 or whatever. They're certainly not at the level that they are, but you look at Caleb Williams, he has not only put up big stats, but big stats when his team needs them. You look so far this season. On Saturday night, almost 500 yards passing, quote unquote, only 2 passing touchdowns. But again, his team needed every one of those yards. And more importantly, they needed every single one of the 48 points that they put up. More specifically, they needed all of Caleb Williams' production over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. Have you seen what this defense has allowed? And again, I know I just sort of defended the defense, but they do in fact still give up a lot of points. Last 5 games, they give up 45 on Saturday night to UCLA. Now, a week ago, they played a bad Colorado team, which is currently 1-10 and will probably finish 1-11 because they still play Utah. Only gave up 17 to them. But the 3 weeks before it, USC gave up 35 points to Cal, 37 points to Arizona, 43 points to Utah. And they went 4-1 in that stretch. The only loss was a 1-point loss to Utah. And so when I look at Heisman Trophy candidacy, and now Caleb Williams still has 2 more games left, got to beat Notre Dame for sure. And I would argue you probably got to beat Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game for me to give you the award. But why it's so impressive is because his team needs every single one of those stats. So to me, Caleb Williams is the Heisman frontrunner right now. The story is incredible. And let me finally say this on USC, and more importantly, their head coach, Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley is an awesome coach. When he got hired at USC, it shook up the college football world. I think we were all stunned, and I think we all knew how awesome he could potentially be at USC. I also think what he's doing is a little bit underrated at this point, as weird as it seems. And because when he left, I think everybody's going to sit there and say, well, we knew how good he was. He brought Caleb Williams. I don't care, okay? What I care about is a couple things. One, we've talked about what Oklahoma has been since he left. We already talked about that last week. But more importantly, he took over a bad USC team. And I think there's this thought of, well, it's USC. How bad could they be? Well, I'm going to tell you right now. They were 4-8 last year. They lost to UCLA by 29 points the day before Lincoln Riley took the job. That same UCLA team that they just beat at the Rose Bowl, they lost by 29 points at home at the Coliseum too. They lost by 18 to Oregon State at home. They lost by 14 to a 3-9 Stanford team at home. And so those home field advantages that are supposed to matter in college football, USC got destroyed every single time they played, basically at the Coliseum last year. And so to fast forward to this year and to have this team in position at 10-1 to potentially play themselves in the playoff, I don't think people are talking about this enough. This is a crazy story. This guy deserves a ton of credit. And it is, again, the way that he's done it with the great offense, with an opportunistic defense. All they ever did was get criticized for the defense down there in Norman. That defense is part of the reason for this team's success, even though they're giving up a ton of yards and a ton of points. They make the plays when they need to win games. And so I know people are going to say, well, he had the transfer portal. Well, everybody had the transfer portal. I don't see a lot of people sitting at 10-1 and controlling their own playoff destiny that had access to the portal. 2 people will say, oh, well, how good was USC? The USC was terrible. And 3, most importantly, don't give me they're going to get killed by Georgia in the playoff anyway. Well, guess what? A lot of people get killed by Georgia. It doesn't make what Lincoln Riley has done any less incredible. So credit to this guy. I got to give him his props, man. I watch this USC team closely. I live in LA, and more importantly, I'm on air on Fox Sports Radio every Saturday night when they play a lot of their games. And for them to just pick up right where they left off in Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, it truly is incredible. Again, the same Lincoln Riley that Oklahoma fans are going to tell you, oh my goodness, he is the reason that we are so happy that he left. He was the problem in this program. Well, look at Oklahoma. Congrats on beating Oklahoma State. You got bowl eligible on Saturday night. Meanwhile, Lincoln Riley and USC have a path to the playoff heading into Thanksgiving weekend.